Good evening, everyone, and I'm very sorry for the technical issues, which I believe are in some way related to the weather conditions this evening. I'm just monitoring the number of people coming in now, and it seems to be leveling off. So what I will do is welcome you all to the last of this year's Oxford Botanic Garden and Arboretum Autumn Science Lectures, sponsored by Plants, People, Planet. My name, if you don't know me already, is Simon Hiscock, and I'm the director of the Oxford Botanic Garden and Arboretum. And as usual, it will be my great pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, but only after I've gone through some preliminary housekeeping information. Firstly, this lecture is being recorded, but your camera and mic are turned off, so you are not being recorded. If you would like to ask a question to the speaker, then please use the Q&A function at any time during the lecture, and I will ask the question on your behalf at the end of the talk. If you need to contact us about anything else, technical issues, for instance, please use the chat function, and one of the team will get back to you swiftly. The recording will be available for attendees after the event, and we will be sharing details about how to access this via the emails that you registered with. So, without further ado, it's now my great pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Dr. Shahina Ghazanfar, from the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, where she holds an honorary research associate position. And she's also got a place at the University of Cambridge as a Gibbs Fellow at Newnham College. Shahina was educated at the University of the Punjab and at the University of Cambridge, where she obtained her PhD. Shahina's research on plants has been extensive in a diversity of fields, ranging from regional floras and vegetation survey to ethno-medicinal plants, biogeography, restoration ecology, and plant conservation. These studies have focused on specific regions, most notably the Arabian Peninsula, Northeast Africa, and the Middle East. She has published a number of books, including a handbook of Arabian medicinal plants and the vegetation of the Arabian Peninsula, and more recently, a floral herbal of Iraq, with Deputy Director here at the Botanic Garden and Arboretum, Dr. Chris Thorogood. Most recently and relevant to her talk, Shahina has published a beautiful book, The Plants of the Qur'an, illustrated by Sue Wickerson. She is currently working on books on the flora of Iraq and the medicinal plants of the Middle East. In 2021, Shahina was awarded the prestigious Linnean Medal for Botany in recognition of her extensive contribution to botanical research. The title of Shahina's talk this evening is The Historical and Cultural Importance of Plants Mentioned in the Qur'an. Shahina, the screen is now yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and I hope you can all hear me clearly. My talk for this evening is on plants of the Quran. I've added, it was originally history and cultural aspects of the plants, but I've added the medicinal uses because I cannot talk about all the plants that are there mentioned in the Quran. Simply, there are far too many to fit for a 1 hour talk. So I thought I will add on the medicinal uses and talk primarily on those plants that are mentioned in the Quran that have some sort of medicinal use, and the uses existed kind of long before the Quran came into existence, long before the Bible came into existence. So that's the historical part of the plants there. I have been very lucky to get Sue Wickison, which is, you can see on the on the right-hand side, the lady who illustrated the book. I mean, she's a botanical artist, quite a renowned botanical artist. And it was just kind of, how should I say, quite a coincidence. I was writing about the plants of the Quran, and she was illustrating some of the plants that she wanted to just take drawings of. And she wanted some sort of, how should I say, somebody who would identify all the plants. And this information came down to Q through a common friend, and he passed it on to me. And I said, Sue, I have no money. This is just something that I'm working on. Would you be willing to illustrate the plants that are mentioned in the Quran? Some of them you already have, just as your interest. And she agreed to that. It took a good 8 years, because obviously botanical artists like to draw from living plants, and the plants of the Qurans are from everywhere. They're just not arid zone plants, but they go into tropical plants and so on. So it took her a good 8 years to illustrate the book, which was published by Q by Q Publishing in 2023. So just coming to the plants that are mentioned in the Quran, we have only 22 plants that are mentioned. There are some plants that I am not absolutely, or not just myself, but other authorities, not absolutely sure what is that, man. These are the names of the plants that are mentioned in the Quran in Arabic. They're just mentioned once. And from the context that is there in the Quran, it is difficult to see if they are one or another plant. So the first 13 plants that you can see at the top, they are food plants, like the lentils, onion, grape, mustard, date palm, snake melon, pomegranate, garlic, fig, gourd, ginger, and olive. And as if you go further up on the third column, for yaqtin, which is the name in Arabic mentioned in the Quran, there are two possibilities. Either it's Leginaria sericaria, which is of the Cucurbitaceae family, or Ricinus. So both plants possibly can be what yaqtin is. And I will mention that later. It is as to why we think that it is one or the other, but it's not certain, because this plant is only mentioned once in the Quran, which makes it a little bit difficult in the context that it is mentioned as to what it is. The other plants that are mentioned in the Quran do not have any kind of medicinal or food value. They're mentioned because they sort of give a message to the plant. To the people from the particular plant itself. Tamarisk, henna, or it can be camphor, the toothbrush tree or salvadora, rihan, basil, or it can be myrtle, acacia, or it can be the euphorbian banana, cedar, as it's mentioned many times. It can be the cedar, the cedar tree, or the lote tree. And lastly, zakum, which not been able to put what the actual plant is. I'll just give you one example of kafur, which is henna. And that is basically said in the Quran that if you are in paradise, or if you are a believer and you will get to paradise, you will receive a cup that is, it's a very difficult word, mizaj, whether it is scented with, or it will have a taste of either henna or camphor or kafur, as it says in the Quran. So I have described both the plants, thinking that if the context when it is mentioned in the Quran is the color of the drink that you will get, which is basically wine. If you follow the Quran and if you're a believer, this is what you will get in paradise. If it is the color that is mentioned, it's possibly henna, because the color of wine is same as what you apply henna on your hands, and it is this reddish color. But if it is the fragrance that is being talked about in the Quran, and we do not know exactly, it would be camphor, as camphor has been used since ancient times to flavor drinks, sweetmeats, and food. So it is with this context in mind that I have included for several plants, for several of the plants that may be mentioned, and we do not know exactly whether it's one or the second or another one. I have mentioned all three. The same goes with manna, which I will talk about later. So the mention of the plants in the Quran have been more or less done for some of them in a collective sense. Trees, for example, several references are made to trees, and they're without a specific name. A reference is made, for example, of a tree that is forbidden to Adam and wife. It does not say whether it is the fig or the apple or any other tree. It just says it is a tree. A reference is made in the Quran to the burning bush, for example, that Moses saw on Mount Sinai. That in itself is contentious, because now my recent work in Saudi Arabia, I was told that possibly Moses was not in the Sinai area, or he did cross it, but came into Saudi Arabia, in northwest Saudi Arabia, and Jabal Laus, or the mountains that kind of are parallel to the Gulf of Aqaba, one of those mountains, a fairly high mountain over there called Jabal Laus, that was the one that Moses actually received the Ten Commandments. So it's I mean, I can't say whether what is correct and what is not correct. However, the burning bush, or the reference to burning bush, is also made in the Quran, but it does not give the actual name. It just says a bush. There's another plant, possibly cedar, but we do not know. Again, which the followers of Prophet Muhammad swore allegiance to him underneath that particular plant. Al-Tuba is a blessed tree, and it is always associated with those plants which will grow in paradise. Again, there's no reference to a particular plant or to a particular species or anything like that. Shajar al-Zakum, this is a tree, it springs out from the bottom of hell. Now, and it's a cursed tree. Again, it's been debated as to what Zakum would be. What is the plant which is Zakum? And amongst the people in Eastern Sudan, they think it's Euphorbia abyssinica. It is quite a poisonous sort of a spiny plant. In Jordan, Zakum is used for Belanites aegyptiaca, again, a very spiny plant. In Turkey, Zakum is used for Nerium oleander, which is actually quite a pretty plant. So I have not said in the Quranic book that Zakum is actually a plant. It is just a term meaning ill health or something bad, basically coming from the word zakma. And it's a mythical, a tree of hell, which if you were to go to hell, that is going to burn you. Sidrat al-Muntaha is the Lot tree. It marks the end of seventh heaven. And according to Islamic beliefs, it is a boundary where no creation can pass. This is mentioned several times in the Quran, and it is believed that Prophet Muhammad traveled with Gabriel, with the Archangel Gabriel, to the part where nobody could go further on. And that was basically celebrated amongst the Muslims as the furthest mosque. We believe that, or the Muslims believe, that Prophet Muhammad traveled to Sidr al-Muntaha during Isra and Miraj, with the 2 parts of the night during the single night in the year 621. Anyway, coming to that, with all the plants that I had to look at, it was, yeah, I mean, I was a bit, I shouldn't say I was surprised. I mean, having been working in botany for a fairly long period of time, but to explain why all the plants that are mentioned in the Quran have come to be known to the people of the Arabian Peninsula, that they were actually seen, possibly eaten, possibly known quite well, maybe even cultivated in the peninsula, in the area where the Quran came, around the area of Makkah or Medina, where Prophet Muhammad lived. And now we know through archaeological and archaeobotanical evidence that many of the plants spread from various parts of the world to other various parts of the world, especially in the Old World. Crops and animals which were favored by humans, and obviously with non-domesticated plants and animals, they spread globally. And with that, we know that we do not know the origin of many. But thanks to molecular work and the work that is being done by a lot of geneticists looking at the species that are more clearly related to the plants that are now in cultivation, we can say that yes, those plants may have originated from those areas. But for some of them, it is not possible to say exactly or pinpoint an area, a region, or a country, as we know it now, where these plants have come from. Because these plants have moved and they have been cultivated for a very long period of time. We know that from the Harappan civilization, which was 2600 to 1900 BCE, they were involved in sea trade with Oman, with Bahrain, and Mesopotamia in the second half of the 3rd millennium. Harappan civilization is what is possibly present in the Sindh area of the Indo-Pakistan subcontinent. And during that time, the plants, whatever that was cultivated over there, or together with other things, but possibly even plants, they came into the Arabian Peninsula. Trade, as we know it, has been established with Egypt from 4,000 years BC between India and the Gulf. That is the Gulf of the Persian Gulf. And there have been cross-cultural contacts between the societies in East Africa, South Asia, Arabia, Southeast Asia, before documented trade of the later periods. And there is evidence from translocated crops, as well as linguistics, which relate to tree crops and the boat technology. So we have some sort of an idea of the movement of plants from various parts of the old world into what is now the Arabian Peninsula, or as what we call it now, but into the Arab world. We know that trade existed between Northeast Africa, India, and Arabia some 2,000 years ago, and much later as well. So plants have moved, and not only have they moved, they have been grown. they have been grown and cultivated in various gardens. And once the plants were established, people knew about them, they used them, either they were in temples or they were in funerary gardens, in sacred gardens, or just in gardens for pleasure. They were there. These were the plants, and some of them had uses. They had a certain culture. Either it may be they were used on graves, they were used as a sacred plant that should be put onto a gravestone or on a graveyard. These plants were known to the people. Many of these have been mentioned in the Bible and also in the Quran. So many of these plants have had a historical value. They are being in historical or known in historical times. One of the other examples that I can say is from the gardens of Sennacherib. This was the garden in Iraq, in Nineveh, around 700 BC. And these were possibly believed to be the hanging gardens of Babylon. There are reliefs which are present showing a very, very extensive system of watering. The plants were exotic. Many of the plants came from elsewhere other than Iraq, and they were brought in from other parts of the world because, from what I understand, these gardens were to give sort of a way how beautiful the gardens were, and not only that, but to show the different types of plants that would grow in different type of areas. So it was showing like a mountain area. From Sennacherib's garden in Nineveh, we have the reliefs, and this is going back, several thousand years, showing pomegranates, showing grapes, which were grown over there. Neither pomegranates nor grapes come from this region at all, as we will learn in a little while. Exemplified by the Chinese, of course, the Han Emperor Wu Ti. He was, I think, I suppose I can say he was, brought a lot of the plants which were growing in the Sogdian region, or the region which was to the Chinese side, to the east of what is now Afghanistan, Iran, sort of northern Pakistan. And the emperor Wu Ti, he sent out a lot of people to various parts of the world, especially in that area, to bring in plants which you could grow in the gardens, which would have some sort of economic and medicinal value. And we can attribute that to him. Grape, which he introduced into China. It originated in the Caucasus and Western Asia. The pomegranate was brought in from Iran, Southwest Pakistan, and Afghanistan. The cucumber, it was brought in from India. The safflower, domesticated in ancient Mesopotamia, that was brought back into China. The walnut, coriander, and I think that's possibly, I can't see that bit of it like the back. These were all cultivated elsewhere, but he brought them back, or his people that he sent out. These were cultivated in China, and they were for some of them, they came back into Europe through China, and we have information on that. So in the Islamic medical system or medicinal system, which is known as the Unani Tib, which is still practiced today, and it is taught as, well, it is not sort of, there are separate schools of it, which will teach the traditional form of medicine called a Unani tip. Yunan is Greece, tip is medicine. So it was the Greco-Arab method of medicine. In that medicine, or the diagnosis in that medicine, it was basically established from the principles of Hippocrates. Now, Hippocratic system of diagnosis was through bodily humors, in which it was assigned to the human body. For example, there were 4 bodily humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And an imbalance of each one of these resulted in some sort of a disease or a condition. And it was important that there was some sort of a medicine which would be given to balance the imbalance of any of these. This basic bodily humor system, or the balancing of bodily humors, was carried on. It was translated, because a lot of the works in Islamic medicine were translated from the Greeks, from Galen, from Hippocrates. And in Unani tip, there were 4 elements that were added on. So these 4 elements were fire, earth, water, and air. These were basically, sort of earth elements. So the blood was fire, the phlegm was water, the yellow bile was air, and the black bile was earth. And then they were given these kind of qualities. So the blood was hot and dry, the phlegm was cold and moist, the yellow bile was hot and wet, and the black bile was cold and dry. Now, this is practiced still today. So when you go into the traditional medicine of Southwest Asia, or those countries which practice the Unani tip, they will look at you and they will find your pulse or whatever, and they will say, oh, your condition is hot and dry. So they will give you the medicines or the plants, herbal medicine, that will balance the hot and dry system to make it perfect. So you're not hot and you're not dry. You're either not cold, not moist, or neither hot nor wet, but you have a balance. This system has carried on for a very long time. Of course, during the later centuries, a lot of other medicines influenced the Islamic medicine. These was from Egypt, from Mesopotamia, from China, from India, and they all developed into the Islamic medicine and developed in it. But I have to say that in the Islamic medicine, as previously in the Mesopotamian medicine, there was an element of magic. So whatever that you dispensed, like you could have the herbs that would treat you for a particular condition, but there was always some sort of a magic that was there, that was always there when you were ill. So that also has carried on in the Islamic way. And it is up to God. And he says, and he alone heals me when I'm so. So the belief in God is paramount. No matter what medicines you take, the belief in God that he is the one who is going to treat me and heal me. And from there on, the Prophet Muhammad also said, there is healing in 3. First of all is the belief in God. There is cupping, a drink of honey, and cauterization. But he said, I forbid using cauterization. Honey and cupping and cauterization are practiced in much of the Western world, the Eastern world or Southwest Asian world. And especially honey is, if you go into areas in Arabia, sometimes the honey is very highly prized, and that is because it is considered to have the best healing powers. So just a very short thing about the medicinal plants that are found in the Middle East. Arabian Peninsula, about 6.5% of its flora. In Iraq, 8.7%, Syria, 7%, Lebanon, Palestine, and Israel, not quite correct, the numbers, but it's been very difficult for me to find out. Jordan, about 9%. So these are quite a very similar way, similar type of percentage of what plants are found. Mostly medicinal plants are found in the family Asteraceae, the family Fabaceae, or the pea family Lamiaceae, the mint family, and the Brassicaceae, or the radish family. So that's where most of, now this is not odd because these four families are more prominent in the arid areas, which the whole of the Middle East comes under. So we can trace some of the plants, for example, colocynth or Citrullus colocynthis, from today's use in medicine practices to way back as it was 2,000 years ago or more than 2,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia. This is just one of the examples that I've taken, and that is of Citrullus, the colocynth plant. In ancient Mesopotamia, it was used as a purgative, as a carminative diuretic. It was used for wounds, for weeping wounds. In antiquity, much later, it was used sort of more or less similar manner. In medieval times, similar sort of way. And now, as I'm looking at the medicinal uses of the Middle East, it is used in a fairly similar manner. So the uses of these plants, they're not exclusive to either the Bible or the Qur'an or the Jewish Torah. These have been carried on from ancient times, more than 2,000 years ago, and have been carried on for whatever reason, whether they are absolutely useful or whether it is a cultural thing that you use colocynth as a strong purgative. You use colocynth for your skin problems, whether it is a cultural thing, and most likely this is possibly much more cultural than we would think it to be. I'm going to take a few plants that are mentioned in the Quran and basically used for not necessarily medicinal purposes, but for cultural reasons as well. And they date back to a lot earlier than the present day uses, their uses rather. So the first one, which is iconic amongst the Middle East, or rather in the Arab world, is the date palm, Phoenix dactylifera, Nakhal or Tamar. And it is mentioned about 20 times in the Quran. And there's an old Arabic saying, the uses of date palm are as many as the days in a year. And for sure, they're used for everything from medicine to being food used in various means, to having a plant which will give you shade. It gives you, to some extent, the value or an estate that you can have. You can trade it. So it has these several uses that have been carried on from very ancient times to the present. And of course, it has spread because it is a plant that can withstand hot and dry climate. It can withstand saline soils. And this sugary fruit that it produces, you don't get mold on it. You don't destroy it. It can be stored. And that's why, one of the reasons why it has been so successful. And not just now, we have known that date palm have been used from a very long period of time, not possibly only cultivated, but people have used the date palm from the Bronze Age onwards. These are some of the petroglyphs which have been found in Saudi Arabia, in Jebel Yathib, and in Bir Hima, where these little people climbing up on date palms and utilizing the trees for the dates that they. This wasn't necessarily a cultivation, but these have been found in surrounding a paleo lake. But we now know that the date palm is native to the Arabian Peninsula from various molecular work. The date palm has been mentioned in the Arabic translation of Dioscorides, De Materia Medica. It has been mentioned, various reliefs and so on. So the date palm has been there from a long period of time. It is not mentioned only when Islam started. It has been there and people knew it, people used it, and people used it for every purpose. In the Islamic world, or when Islam came on, it was so popular that when the coins were minted, they had the date palm on it. In Palestine, palm fronds, they were carried in funeral processions. They were laid on graves, basically because, it was believed that the date palm, because it was long and straight, you would get much closer to God. And these were leaves basically to praise God, to ask forgiveness. And these have been found on various tombstones. So for the history of the date palm, in ancient Mesopotamia, it has been used for ear ringing, for ulcers, for gangrene, for wounds, for jaundice, for various gastrointestinal problems. In antiquity, the stones were used to heal wounds. The fronds were used for kidney and bladder infections. In Eastern medieval times, the softwood dates were used for stomach problems, and the date palm heart was used for bile, fever, and ulcers and sore throat. At the moment now, as I've been looking at it, the male inflorescence, which is the spadix, it has been used as an aphrodisiac, but also as a general tonic. Paste made from dates applied to the forehead to relieve headaches. It is mixed with salt, and the paste is applied to bruises. Now, this is still used today. So the use of date palms goes way back to the ancient Mesopotamian times, perhaps not exactly in the same way, but the medicinal uses are still there. One of the plants that I would like to also mention again is the pomegranate. Pomegranate has, apart from being a very beautiful plant, a beautiful flower, it has a lot of cultural significance. The origin is Iran, southwest Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Pomegranate is mentioned in the Quran as a blessing. It is as a symbol of paradise. It is an example. Do not be excessive and wasteful. And I think it all comes from the fact that when you open upon pomegranate, it's got so many seeds in it. It's got a huge number of seeds in it that it says, do not eat them all. Do not be wasteful. Do not be excessive. Share it with other people. That is the message that the Quran gives, looking at the pomegranate. Prophet Muhammad said that as a fruit, it purges the body of spirit of jealousy and hatred. Of course, it has other ancient cultural intonations, which the Zoroastrians considered it as a fire, as a symbol of eternal life, as a symbol of strength. It has always been used as a symbol of fertility, prosperity, righteousness, eternal life by the Jewish ancient Egyptians. And they used to put these in that. It has always been believed to be good for the stomach, for the throat, and now, as we know it, it's come back as an antioxidant. So in ancient Mesopotamia, the root, bark, leaves, the rind, juice, and fruit, they were used for treatment of skin diseases, for sores. Parts of it, I mean, the juice was put in the eye for eye sores. It was put in the ear for earache, and it was used in nose. In antiquity, it was used just as good for the stomach, as a tonic. In medieval times, the dried seeds were used to cure dysentery. The juice of the seeds mixed with others, it was used for the honey of that, used mixed with honey, used for ulcers, for sores, for earache. And it has always been used as a health tonic. The rind has always been used as a vermifuge, and the juice as an antiseptic. So these are, again, not the uses and that we know from today. They have been known in ancient Mesopotamia. And the mention of pomegranate in the Quran just does not come from the Quranic times and from the time of Prophet Muhammad. These plants were there, they were known, possibly even cultivated in some parts of the Arabian Peninsula. And they were brought in there because they were known for their usefulness and for them to be used since a long period of time. The same is true for the fig, teen. It is mentioned in the Quran, and it is one of the few classical fruit trees which we associate with the beginning of horticulture and domestication in the Mediterranean region. Now, the figs, they go back to, the cultivation of figs go back to Neolithic times, and predates the domestication of cereals. They're mentioned in cuneiform texts. That means they were mentioned in ancient Mesopotamians. They were grown in palm groves, in different vineyards, and in orchards. And the fruit at that time was traded either as a fresh produce, or it was dried. And it was a very expensive fruit at that time. And for transport, the fresh fruits would be squashed. They would be made into kind of like round tablets. They were then strung with a rope, dried, and transported from one place to the other. This is still prevalent in Southwest Asia. If you were to go in any market in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Iran, in Pakistan, you can buy these garlands of figs, which are dried figs, and you can just bring them, sort of rehydrate them and use them. So figs have been used, and as it says, in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, in ancient, mentioned by Theophrastus, mentioned by Pliny. China, it came at a slightly later date, but they were, because of the name that corresponds to the Persian form, fig for hazir or azir, for fig, it is called as anjir. And if you look at the etymology of anjir, it means hidden. The flowers are hidden. And you can see that the fig is a synconium. If you open it, all the flowers are inside, so they're not relevant on a particular tree. So the figs formed a good and common food source for many civilizations, and it has a very long cultural history which is attached to it. It is mentioned in the Bible, in the Genesis, as one of the fig leaves that was there for Adam and Eve to hide themselves because they'd eaten the forbidden fruit. They are mentioned in Deuteronomy. In Christianity, it has been associated with vine as the emblems of peace and security, and it was seen not necessarily at olden times, but even in recent times. If there was a fig crop failure, it was as a punishment from God. In the hadith, hadith is the narrations of Prophet Muhammad, which have been collated together fairly, almost about 200 years after the death of the Prophet. And the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari is considered one which is fairly, how should I say, as much accuracy as one can get 200 years after the death of the Prophet. And it is said that Prophet Muhammad is said to have stated that if there was a fruit to descend from paradise, it would be the fig, as it did not have pips in it. And they were recommended to prevent hemorrhoids and piles and to help with gout. So it was a very useful plant at that time. So from looking at its historical value, Ficus carica, or the thene, it was ancient. In ancient Mesopotamia, it was eaten as a fruit. The leaves were used as poultice for eyes, for fevers, for skin lesions of the scalp. In antiquity, they were used for treating throat problems, for kidney, for sores, for skin ulcers, and for the spleen. In medieval times, they were used for hemorrhoids and for piles. And now the use is very much to prevent hemorrhoids, piles, and to also help with gout. I'm going to take one more plant before I finish off, and that is Alhagi grecorum, Taranjabine or Turanjabine, depends upon different spellings. And this is one of the plants which is considered as the manna, al-man, the plants that were said to be in the context when Moses was leading his tribe in the deserts of the Sinai. And the people of, they said, "Oh, Moses, show us, what should I say? How can you prove that you are a prophet? Bring us quails, bring us the protect." So Moses said that he will bring, he laid down the bread for him and for you, and the quails, and a protective cloud came over, the 12 springs that flowed from Moses when he struck the rock with his staff. Now, manna has been controversial for a very long period of time, and we still do not know exactly what man is. What are the plants? There are several plants that can qualify as man, and Alhagi is one of them. It's mentioned in the Bible, and it says, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you." It was white like coriander seed, tasted like wafers made with honey. So in 973, Al-Biruni, who was an explorer, a physician, and he wrote on simple drugs, the book of drug knowledge. And he quotes in this book a quote by Abu Yusuf from the Sindh, from the lower Indus Valley area. And it says that Al-Hajj is a shrub of small size growing on saline soil, which is fine because the area of the Sinai is very, very saline, desert type of soil. Its fruit is red like blood. And in Persian, it's called chemathon. It chooses the best earth, but one can see even on the top of rocks. Should you try to dig it, it will, you won't stop until you reach water and moisture. And sometimes it may lead you to a depth of 200 cubits. Now, this is very true, because if you approach or if you see Al-Haji in the sand growing in the area, it is very, very difficult to unroot it, because like most desert plants, they will send their roots fairly deep to the area of moisture or to, subsurface moisture, which is fairly deep in many parts of the Arabian and the Southwest Asian deserts. It talks about its seeds. They are in a pod of the same color, which is red. It is crooked so that it is like a tail of a scorpion. And you can see from the illustration that the pods are quite crooked, and they do have a very pointed kind of a tree. Now, he thought at that time that all the manna is generated by an insect. And it said that, when you open the leaf, the insect leaps forth, but it does deposit a white liquid, which is the manna. So the manna from Al-Haji Grigorum, it is an exudate, but it does not apparently involve insects. It comes as a brownish teardrops. It is considered one of the most economically important products in Iran and Iraq. And it is used in traditional medicine and in the preparation of special sweetmeats. And it is mentioned in a cookbook by Nawal Nasrullah called Delights from the Garden of Eden. And there are two shops that, when I was looking into this, one or several in Iran, but one certainly in the region of Iraq. And they said that these are the sweetmeats where you will never find anything like it at all. They are collected from this plant, from Al-Haji, and this very sweet, almost like honey, flaky substance is used to prepare these sweetmeats. So how was it used in ancient Mesopotamia? It was used for joints, muscles of the legs, headaches, heat stroke, for skin boils, for ulcers, and for many urinary problems. It is not mentioned by Dioscorides, but in medieval times, it was used to treat chronic headaches, chest and abdominal conditions, for coughs, for the treatment of fever, and to some extent, for the eyes. Now, of course, it is quite rare. It is not a very common plant, but it is used in the treatment of cataracts, for migraine, for painful joints. It is used as a laxative, as a diuretic, for kidney stones, and aphrodisiac, and skin problems. And Rowohlt, Leonhard Rowohlt, who was a German collector of plants, he was sent by his brother to Syria in 1575, go and collect plants of medicinal importance. And he came to Aleppo, to Syria, and then came to Lebanon. And this was one of the plants that he collected because it was very much in use, and it had a value as a medicinal plant. This herbarium specimen is produced in a book, and it is present in the Naturalis Biodiversity Center in Belgium. So coming to more or less the end of my talk, what I really want to stress is that it is extremely important to preserve a culture, whether it may be through religious texts like the Bible, the Qur'an, the Torah, or any, or whether it is from other historical texts. But where you are associating a certain plant with the culture, you are quite likely to preserve that habitat, because you can take, for example, the date palm. It has been grown in California. Best dates come from that region, but they do not have when you eat a date coming from California, it doesn't have the same culture that is associated with it. The palm groves do not have the same culture that is associated with it. They do not have the same history that we know of from the old world or from the ancient Mesopotamian carried on into the Arab world. So when we lose a species, there's also a loss of history and culture that is associated with it in its native environment. Therefore, what I'm talking about is obviously, it is extremely important that plants do not lose their habitats and the conservation of a species, but also to conserve the culture that is associated with that. And it is through ancient texts, through paintings, through botanic gardens. They help to preserve the plants and to some extent the culture that is associated with them. If the botanic gardens and other places where these are associated, if they would extend that information and knowledge to where these plants originated and how important they were in the cultural sort of significance of that region, they do carry a lot more and a lot more message together with it. And there we are. Eat a pomegranate, visit a bath, and your youth will hasten back. This is a very cultural saying, but surely a lot of the people do still use it because it's historical, it's cultural. And the fruit of pomegranate is by far means, I mean, you can use it. But if it has a little bit, eat it, your youth will hasten back. It has a little bit more meaning, a little bit more interesting meaning. So thank you very much. Hello. Yeah.
Hello, Shahina. It's
I think I've gone over time, really.
Oh no, you're fine. It was riveting, and I'm sure everyone was welcoming that the extra time. So thank you everyone for staying with us. So Simon introduced the the talk, and I'm closing the talk. So my name's Chris Thorogood, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Botanic Garden Arboretum, for those who don't know. And I'm also a close friend and colleague of Shahina's. So it's been such a pleasure, Shahina, to have you speak for us this evening. Shahina and I worked on a project focused on the plants of Iraq some time ago. I loved particularly the end of your talk. Well, I loved all of it, Shahina, but that proverb around eat a pomegranate and visit a bath, your youth will listen back. What a lovely saying to end the talk on. So thank you so much. And I can tell that our audience were delighted as well by the talk because we have a lot of questions. So I'm mindful of your time and our audiences, but I will go through as many as I can. The first one, which I noticed came in very early during the talk, is what inspired you to get involved with this project, Shahina?
Oh my goodness, I mean, I've been thinking about this for quite a long time, and there are a couple of books, a couple of sort of booklets on plants of the Quran, but they did not go into depth about the history of the plants. They were just, okay, these are the plants that I mentioned. They are mentioned in this verse and in this paragraph, etc. But they did not go into the history of the plants. They just mentioned there. So I thought, well, hey, I'm sitting in Kew. I would love to investigate a little bit further into it. And that was my sort of instigation to write this book on the Quranic plants. I also did not agree with some of the interpretations of the previous authorities that had written about a particular plant in its Arabic terms, that it was this one, because it's something that could not have got to Arabia. So that was one of the reasons that I had to look into the history of the plants, whether it could have been possibly that it was found in Arabia or the people had known about it in Arabia. The Quran was written,
Thank you. And the next question we have is, in the Bible, there is mention of milk and honey as good things to have. Can we assume that the abundance of honey in Eastern cultures is associated with having a healthy life rather than a sweet life in a hedonistic way.
I can't see this. Did you say that in the Bible?
Yes, but there's mention of milk and honey. And so I think the question is the association with a healthy life or a sweet life in a more hedonistic sense?
That's thank you for that question. I mean, I wish I knew the answer. No, yeah. We have the same in Islam. If you are in paradise, there will be honey and it will be sweet. Oh, and I think that's how. Take
And
your
the ancient Greeks, I know.
I would say, yeah, lead a healthy life, and it will be sweet. Yes.
Yeah. A question: are abortive plants mentioned in the Quran? So I know abortive plants. So I know, like Aristolochias, for example, were used a lot in herbal medicine.
No, not in as far no, not in the Quran at all.
No.
In the Medicine of the Prophet, there are several plants that have been mentioned. They don't actually say abortive.
No.
They say they help with women's problems.
Understood.
So, it's not because the Muslims believe that every child is from heaven. It's a gift of God, and you will keep it.
As we would have expected. The next one is anonymous. This is so interesting. Thank you. I wondered, is it possible that the plants that are not recognized as long extinct and their evolutionary lines are not traceable to plants we recognize now, or is it simply that there is too little information to identify them? I imagine that's also a very difficult one to answer.
Well, I think you can answer that well as I can. Yes, some of the plants they have been, for example, all the alliums like allium, garlic and onions. We have been able to trace it because of the near relatives that have been found in that region, and looking at the genomes or the molecular work. Most of the plants, yes, perhaps. But work is still in progress. Not all the plants can be, but I think most of the plants can be traced to their origin, not necessarily the actual plant, but the near relatives, yes.
It's interesting, this question and your answer, because it bridges nicely to the next one. And I'm thinking of some of the ancient texts around Silphium, which is obviously not associated with Islamic medicine, but the principle is the same, because this question is, hello, and thank you for your very informative talk. Various species of ferula, giant fennels, such as Ferula asafoetida, Ferula gamosa, have medicinal, commercial, and even mythic properties in the ancient Greek Roman worlds. Do they appear in Islamic texts?
Ferula, yes. Ferula certainly appears in Medicine of the Prophet, but not in the Quran. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Similar to the first question, what is your personal relationship with the plants of the Quran, Shahina?
With the plants of the Quran?
Yes.
Personal relationship. I love them all. I mean, I think none of them are. All of them. They have their certain tastes and their certain position in everyday life. So that's I suppose that's my personal relationship. All I can say that when I was a young person and I was living in Balochistan, and my parents, which is the area where a lot of pomegranates are produced, and whenever we had a pomegranate, and my father or my mom would always point out, this is a fruit of paradise. Eat it, it's a fruit of paradise. And this is, it's again something that is brought into many of the Muslims. The plants that are mentioned as such in the Quran, and have been told that this is a fruit of paradise. You will reap the benefits. If you believe in God, you will get these fruits.
Thank you. I'm just mindful of the time, so I think I'm going to choose. There's still many questions left, and we won't have time to get through them. So apologies if I didn't make it to yours. I'm going to choose one last one. which is your cultural reference is fascinating. How many of these plants, figs, pomegranates, palms, for example, are preserved in art? And then specifically, does acanthus play any significance as it is preserved so much in art?
Sorry, just say it again, because your voice is very low to me.
Oh, apologies. So the question is, acanthus, does it have significance because it features so prominently?
No, not really. No,
Okay.
I haven't come across either in the Medicine of the Prophet or in the Quran, and it is not, as far as I can see. You see, most of our art starts from the Persian art, and it is not really. It doesn't figure very much in the Persian art, in the Mughal paintings, for example, or in some of the ones which I suppose I can attribute to the Muslim world. Yeah, no, I don't think so. But I mean, I may be wrong. I haven't really looked deeply into that.
Interesting set of questions and a lovely way to fascinating talk, and I'm sure everyone will agree. So thank you ever so much once again,
thank you,
Shahina, and what a lovely way to finish our autumn science lecture series. It's been our very great pleasure to have you on this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon.
And thank you everyone. And thank you everyone for joining, and good night.
Thank you for all those joining me. Yeah.
Good night.